Hello Internet, John McDonald here. I should say hello world actually. Since this is my first programming tutorial that I'm going to put out there, I'm actually pretty excited. Um, Let me switch over to the browser real quick and kind of explain what's going on. So I've been working on, now that I'm out of school I have a little bit of free time and I've been working on building a new site, which I have here. I'm not going to detail all this, right? It's a pretty cool thing that I'm working on, right? And it's an Angular app, which is completely, decoupled, so it's a complete standalone front end, all right? And hence, I needed to get up to date real quick on building the Restful API, and just kind of see what was going on in the Laravel world. I like to use Laravel and PHP as a C developer, and especially as somebody who comes from the gang of 4 days myself, right? PHP works pretty well, especially Laravel, with Taylor Otwell, really putting in a lot of object-oriented design into the framework and all the different tools out there. So I love it for back-end APIs and things like that. And plus it's extendable. PHP and all that stuff is extendable. So and if you're a C developer, PHP and Laravel is literally C style. So it's all good, right? So because I was in school and I took a little bit of a break, I of course was left off at Laravel 9 and needed to get back up to date and see what was going on in the 11 world. And so this is one of the first tutorials that came up, and I read through it just to kind of see if there was any useful information. And pretty much what this guy discussed is implementing a repository pattern, which isn't kind of native yet. You'll have to create your own repository class. But I suspect this is probably going to be something that's put into it by default, right? And the reason why I'm creating this tutorial is it's an addendum to his, right? Because if you follow through it, and especially if you're somebody who's coming back and trying to use older conventions of Laravel, you're going to find that this tutorial is going to leave you like, oh, it's not going to work. And you're going to see a lot of these comments from people in here who are like, this doesn't work, got it tested, blah, blah, blah. People complaining about a lot of stuff, or worse. Some of these folks are complaining that this dude just made this entirely overly complicated with, using these design patterns, when in fact, the main focus of this is repository design patterns, and it's a very useful design pattern, so it's definitely worth implementing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started here, and we're going to start with step 1, all right? So step 1 here is pretty much the generic composer create project command, and this command works. However, if you have issues encountering downloading some of the development files, you can use the --no-dev command inside the command there after the preferred distribution to forego downloading some of the framework development files, which you might want to do anyways, right? I am not using that. I'm using Laravel Sales, so I'm going to switch over and kind of go. I'm not going to teach a whole lot about Docker and Sail, but I just want to let you know that's why it's going to be different than step 1 here. But I am going to show that real quick, I guess. Let me switch that over here. We're going to move to VS Code, and then we're here. So as I said, we have a back end which is working and completed. It's decoupled from both of my front end Angular applications, right? Here I'm going to just do entirely a folder, a new Laravel project, right? I'm going to just call it tutorial. I'm not going to call it REST API CRUD. Just keep it kind of simple here. So the first thing you got to do is use curl, which is a great old school tool which I usually just say it's called URL, but it's really called client URL. And so it's going to just make a HTTP call, to save a file. And for Laravel Sail, it's just https /laravel.build and then / the name of your application, right? And then what Laravel.build is just literally a bash script on the internet, right? That sets up your Sail container for you. So you just pipe that into bash, right? And before I do this, I'm actually going to stop my existing container just so there's no conflicting issues real quick. And then, cool. Alright, and I'm going to run that real quick. Alright, which, as you see here, it is working fine and downloading Laravel. And actually, to real quickly explain to you, I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux too, which is why you see this on Debian. I'm a Linux user, but when I got into engineering, I had a whole lot of applications I had to utilize in Windows, and actually Windows 11 is pretty nice. I like it. I have no issues with it right now. So it's going to ask me, for some final adjustments here, and just quickly put in, my password, and we're good, right? So now I have to actually import, that new project, the new folder there. I'm going to add that to our workspace, which is right here, is tutorial, and I'm going to hit OK. Alright, and under, is that it? Or no? Yeah, let me double check. I don't believe yes. So I did, whoa. I was in the wrong path, sorry. This was my previous test when I ran the Composer Create project, so I have to import it for the new, I have to import it for the one we just created, right, which is actually a couple up right there. There we go. Alright, so now that that's in there, okay, we're going to, spin up Laravel sail, which is going to create our container, right? And so we need to change into the tutorial folder, and then we're pretty much going to run / vendor then sail and then up, right? And that's going to run through, and it's going to create all of our containers and bring up our code here. Okay, and as you can see now, it created our container in VS Code for us, and that's one of the great reasons I like Docker, right? Because then I can, simply just control it from here. Like I can stop it if I need to. Right. Clear that, get my terminal back, and now that it's built, I can start it here. Okay, and it's going to give me my terminal. Okay, and so just to kind of quickly check and make sure everything's good, we're going to switch back to the browser here. We're going to look at my old one, which shouldn't be working. Okay, and it's not, but it is working with the new one. Right, so our new one is up and running, and this should just be a default Laravel install. Okay, and it is. Alright, so we have our default Laravel install, we have Laravel up and running. We are at step 2 now, and that kind of happens by default with Sail. I can show you that really quickly as well in MySQL. This is, let's see here, refresh, and there we go. This is our table, so it's done some of it for us, right? And it's operating on the basic configuration, right? So that takes us down to step 3, okay, where he is instructing that, all right, we're going to just create first, we're just going to create one simple, resource for the API, and it's going to just be a product API resource. Here in this part, though, we're going to actually create our ORM, our Eloquent model, and we're going to do everything, create the migration for it as well, right? So now one of the differences that you're going to see here between what I'm typing, because I'm using Sail, is that I have to run the command pretty much through Sail and into the container, right? Whereas generally if you're going the Composer route for the command line, you're just going to type exactly what he says. You're going to run your artisan script through PHP, okay? So I'm just going to go to Sail, and instead of it being PHP artisan, it's your Sail application, and then you're going to run artisan, and you're going to make model product. Okay, says there. Let me switch over to VS Code before I run this. So we're going to make product model, okay? Just like it said there previously. So we're going to do that. And our models, migrations, our seeders, and everything, and policies are created. So let's go back to our folder. I'm going to kind of stay in that now and show you as this stuff goes along. App, our models, and here's our product model, right? So here in step 4, everything's working fine, right? Everything, there's no issues, right? And normally if you get an issue in Laravel, Artisan's going to throw it for you. So in step 4, he's just having us define the models table, right? And so I'm pretty much just going to copy the migration in step 4 and paste it into our migration that we just created here, okay? And our migrations are in database migrations, right? And here it is to create products table, and you're just pretty much going to replace the help function, okay? And there you go. And it's a pretty basic table, okay? There's not much to it. You should know what migrations are and such if you're at this point in creating APIs with Laravel, or Eloquent and all that, and your seeders and all that. I'm not going to cover all what those are. That's basic Laravel. So if you're implementing repository patterns, I'm assuming you know what these are already. So then we're going to quickly kind of move along here and go back and see that we are not. I'm going to make this bigger because that's all we're going to use. Paywall. All right. So we just did this portion here, okay? And again, there's nothing wrong, but you'll notice here he doesn't say to actually run the migration. Okay, so don't run the migration yet. Next, we're going to create a product interface, okay? And this is where I'm going to kind of start explaining some of these design patterns in a clean way, I guess. So we're going to, or simplified way, so we're going to go back to our VS Code, okay? And we're going to do exactly what he says to do, right? We're going to make an interface, which actually, since that has an artisan command, as you see, make interface, that is a native design pattern that Taylor Otwell implemented into Laravel, right? And so he wants us to move this into interfaces, and then he's going to call this product repository interface, and we're going to create that. And that's successful, right? And so you can see in our app now we got our new repositories folder, right? Our interfaces, wait, what did I just create? Yeah, our new interfaces and our new product repository interface, right? And so here it is. An interface pretty much is a collection of just functional prototypes. It's pretty much, I hate to say it in terms of a contract, but it kind of is like a functional prototype contract. When you create an interface, it's an implementable design pattern that's telling you to pretty much like, you're going to have to, if you implement this is the definition of your object, of your model, or whatever whatever object is implementing your interface. And so it's literally going to be a collection of functional prototypes. And what a functional prototype is, especially if you come from like the C world or like, compiled languages where you have to define what a function is before you implement a function. Like for instance, if you were in C, you would create a functional prototype. Like if you were doing calculate taxes, right? And you had salary. You actually wouldn't put your arguments there. You would just define the very basics of what your function is, actually a prototype, right? You're just your data structure, your data types, right? Your return type, your function name, and the type of what your input's going to be. Now you can, if you want to, put names there, but and prototypes, they just get omitted, so it's pointless, right? And then later on in the code, you would literally do your function implementation, right? And that's where you would start to define, some of your names and your parameters and stuff like that, right? Return integer, you know what I'm saying? So all your repository is pretty much just a collection of these functional prototypes here. Okay, there's never going to be really any functional implementation in an interface. Okay, so we have that there, and he's going to instruct us now inside that newly created interface, okay, to add this code here. Okay, copy and paste, and literally just copy and pasted it into the file we were looking at, and hence why you see, you know, your scope and just your function names and no implementation, right? Again, it's just a collection of your interface is just a collection of functional prototypes. Okay, so we'll save that. Okay, and now I'm actually going to run through the tutorial exactly how he's doing it, and then I'm going to go back and fix and adjust some of the things, right? Okay, so now we have to create our next, in step 6 here, we're going to create our repository, right? This is kind of the whole, you know, point of what he's doing, and I'm pretty much literally just going to type this command here. And as you can see, the difference in this command is that this is kind of where he's introducing like an advanced level that is beyond Laravel. At the moment, I suspect that repositories or some form of, you know, model abstractions are going to get natively implemented into Artisan and things like that, just like a lot of these other ones are, like make model, make interface, all that stuff. You're probably going to see a make repository pretty soon, right? However, right now we're just defining it as a general ADT or extract data type, right, or class or object, right? So we're going to go back here, and, you know, with our artisan command, we're going to type exactly what he says. We're going to make it a class, okay, and we're going to put it in repositories, and we're going to call it product repository. And it was successfully created, okay, and now we have a new repository folder with our product repository in it, okay. So we have a product repository interface, okay. This interface is going to tell us what our product repository is to implement, what functions it needs inside of it, okay. You know, this is our implementation of our interface, which is literally why, you know, in step 6, after creating the repository, he tells us to add the following code, which is pretty much everything we added here, except now these are implementations, but they're not full implementations as you see, right? They're abstracted a layer, and they're actually calling the product, or the model, I'm sorry. And that's the whole point of the repository, right? Normally with an MVC, you know, you're inside your controller, you're calling your model logic directly inside your controller, right? And so what this is allowing you to do, and why it's very useful, to be quite honest with you, is abstract your functional prototype names like index inside your controller away from how your model is implemented inside your controller. So if you ever need to change what index does, okay, you have that one space, you have that abstraction, you have that class to do it, and it's easy to decouple and swap it out. And now you know, you pretty much can set and forget your controller to a certain extent, right? So anyways, we're going to paste that in there, right, into our product repository, as he says, right? Okay, and then we're going to save it. Okay, so we've saved it in there. Okay, as you can see, no errors yet, but this is actually the first part of where an error is actually introduced, and I'm going to save time and avoid running it and just getting it and fix it right now, because it's pretty minuscule, right, of an error. As you can see, he spelled repository wrong. He's got his T and his O backwards, right? So that is the first thing you would have to fix in there. And I'm going to do that right now. Okay, I'm just going to spell repository right inside the class name, because that's how he references to it and such. Okay. And then in step 7, he says we need to, bind the repository and interface together into our service provider. And this is kind of, one of the areas where, me coming from previous versions of Laravel, in the past where you had to, do your service bindings inside your app configurations, Laravel 11 conveniently has abstracted that stuff out into, a bootstrap, right, form, which is actually pretty cool and probably the way it should be. So you have this providers class now inside your bootstrap folder. And this is one of the parts where I was kind of hitting an error, because, in the past, I was actually going into, your config app and then, dropping, in your provider array there. That's how, you had to do it with Laravel previously, right? And if you do it in that route, it's not going to work, okay? It's going to cause some odd errors. And so, and, your bootstrap, this is where, your binding's going to actually happen. This is where you're going to register your service providers and such in here, okay? And so, and you're going to see right now, okay, because in step 7, that's what we're going to do. He's going to want us to go ahead and make a provider, a service to bind that these interfaces in this repository together. So we're going to do make provider, and we're going to call it repository service provider, just as he says, just like he says. Sorry, I spelled provider wrong. Provider. Okay, and it was successfully created. Okay, and we can go into providers, and as you can see, okay, we have our generalized base app service provider, and then we have our newly created repository service provider. And again, I'm pretty much, this, binding service providers, pretty standardized code. It works for the most part as that. You just need to make sure you get your includes in, right? And again, he spells repository wrong, okay? So this is another source of error in the code that you may be hitting. Let's just go ahead and copy this and drop that in there, okay? And that's all spelled wrong. And just grab our imports in, or includes, okay? And then, as you can see, I'll show you here as we switch. It's throwing spelling errors because it can't find a lot of the references, okay, to the actual class name we fixed earlier. Okay, that's why it can't find it. And now it's unable to actually import the class because the spelling errors that are in the include here. So if you fix that, you're not going to get any errors. As you can see, all the errors are gone. Okay. Then we move on next to our 2 product request and update request, right? This is actually what makes, these are the generic actual RESTful API request validations, store, get, post, update, all that kind of stuff, right? And when we created our model and such, our product controller, okay, that was what the -A was. It actually creates everything for you in that sense, okay? So that's kind of why he's literally avoiding the make request command in this portion. As you can see, all these other ones here, you have your artisan command to make your file here. That was made in the -A, okay, -all for that particular, resource. So that's why they're already, if you go in, you won't have to do that. You go in, your requests are already there. At least the scaffolding form is. So all he's wanting you to do at this point, right, is add some code to it to, do some request validation, all right? And so this is your store product requests. Literally just going to copy it as he has, okay, and then paste it, right, and store it. And we'll kind of check. I don't see any spelling errors in there. He wants us to, in the next box, literally just, paste. And this is just basic, request validation stuff, right? Very, very basic stuff. You should know what this is, truthfully, if you're here. Okay, so that's in there. We're good there. I'm going to go over here, close those two requests as well. And now he wants us to make an API response class. So this is pretty common. This, again, is kind of like an outside of Laravel thing. And Laravel does have some stuff in there to deal with this, but I'm just going to continue to follow along with how he does this. And this is pretty much like a way to, format your JSON, your outputs and all that stuff. How to handle your API responses. And this is a good thing because it does also give you another layer of abstraction to work with, right? So I'm going to just kind of switch back over real quick here, and we're going to type it in just like he says to do. We're going to make this a class, and we're going to put this in classes, which is going to drop into that folder there. Response class. Okay, boom. Successfully created. I will close up some of these here. And as you can see, there's our new API response class. Open it up because literally in the very next line, he's wanting to just paste some code into it, pretty much, right? And so we're going to drop that in there, okay? And again, it's all that is some static calls to form, your response, okay? Giving you a success code and stuff. And this is actually response handler too. So next we're going to scroll over. I'm going to close that. I'm going to close our binding here, and then go to step 10. And now he wants us to define a resource, our product resource for our API here. And paste this code to it. So pretty much I'm going to run this command, okay? I'm just going to go ahead and copy, the resource right now and paste it in at the same time after it's created. And that's what he's doing, is he's actually forming and transforming the resource, the actual data into, an array, right? To end up becoming a JSON resource, okay? So we're heading back over to VS Code here. We're going to type our command in there to create that resource page. And this is actually native plugin, Laravel. So you want to name this product resource. Alright, it was created successfully. Yeah, and so that's going to be an HTTP resources, product resources, and then we're going to paste the code I copied earlier, okay, from the next line on there. So we got our product resource in there. We'll go back here. We are past step 10 now. He wants us to go in and paste this into our product controller, which was created when we did our models and migration and such, right? So that's already going to be there for you. You don't need to run any commands. So just run and copy that. Go over into your controller, which is here, your product controller. Sorry, open up the other one. And just paste it in there. Okay. Paste. Wait, I didn't copy it. Sorry. Yes. Paste and missing something now. What did I do? I got rid of our PHP. Okay, so let's let's go ahead and go all the way down to text. All right. And, whoa, okay. What did I do? Okay. I copied stuff I wasn't supposed to. All right, so sorry, copy, paste, and here we go. Okay, and now you can see it's littered with errors, right? And this comes back to a couple things, right? Our spelling error, which is in here still, okay, because we just pasted it. That's actually traversed all the way through repository. No, that's actually spelled correctly, right? But here, he's referencing his API response class incorrectly, right? Because he named it API response class, and he told us to. So if you get to this point and it's not working, this is why, right? One of the reasons why. He also forgets to include that in his included here on there. So if you just you change those, okay, it'll work. And at this point, it's just quite honestly best to just do a quick find and replace with that response class area, and just go to the next one and just fix them. Make sure you don't double replace, like right here. Okay. So that's good. And now you can see this file no longer has any errors, and actually this is all pretty good, right? I'm going to take a quick minute to kind of explain what is going on here now, okay? Because we are at, what? Step 12, yes, okay. So before we get much further, because we're pretty much at the end, we'll just, install our API scaffolding and then, do our quick route in there, okay? So, what's happening here, right, in the controller, and that's the whole point of this repository pattern, is, as you can see in your controller's index calls, in your method there's no actual model, right? And that's where a lot of folks don't. At first, when I saw this, I was like, geez, man, we're already, doing MVC and we're creating models and such like that. And it's like, no, we're going to create like a model of a model in a sense. But no, I mean, it was a pretty good call on this one. I do see a lot of good reasoning for doing this. And the more I looked at it, I'll get into that next, though, okay? There's some issues with this, okay? Some pretty significant issues, actually. And so, and how this is actually working is it's just bringing in our repository interface, okay? Our controller is being forced to adhere to our collection of functional prototypes, okay? And when it calls that, it's going through implementing the product repository there. Okay, and then the product repository is actually implementing our model. Okay, and hence that's what's going on there with the call to the index here, right? And then we're getting our collection back. So this is, in theory, would allow us to change this here, in here to pretty much any other form of modeling, right? Like it could be ORM, it could be, Laravel's, I can't remember what they call their intermediate querying, DB query or whatever it is, or query, or custom, or it could just be completely different outside of like MariaDB, MySQL, Redis, data or memory database and things like that, Mongo. Okay. So that's where we're at there, okay? And next he literally just tells us, all right, let's turn this into a complete Sanctum API and install our Sanctum and API scaffolding, right? Which is just the PHP install, artisan install API, okay? And that's going to put in a little bit more of the API scaffolding, right? That's going to take a minute, okay? And then after that, we'll wait. Here's where migration run comes. Okay, so yes, we do want to migrate because he did indicate to migrate earlier when we created our product migration. Oh, what do I got here? I might. Whoa. I have an error. Okay, it's already. Oh, it's already. Yeah, so that's fine. All right. That is because I already have a basic Laravel build in there, so to speak. All right. So we refresh this here. All right. And actually, what we'll do is drop all these tables. Okay. And that's kind of the weird thing sometimes about Docker is it will retain some of these things sometimes. All right, so let's go back here and then run that again. When we get to our migration run, okay. We shouldn't have any errors, see. Okay. Now that was not part of, that was actually just because I had previously had a base Laravel installed on my MySQL server here, so that had nothing to do with this, okay. So now that we got the scaffolding in place, we got to go to our routes here and just drop in our route. And that's the last and final step of this tutorial, right? And you should be able to kind of just, as he's saying, go from there, We'll save that route, okay. And now we're going to test it, okay. So let's see what happens. And let me make sure here, yes. Let's go localhost. Okay. API. And we're going to go /products. And there we go. Okay. Like Minnie said, following it directly does not work. Okay. One of the reasons is he chose to create a repositories directory. However, name is include repository here, in his namespace. Okay, so that's the first error you may get, right? So in order to correct that, you just simply fix the namespace issue, okay? And that, let's see here, let me close these files here real quick. Actually, this is our file here, right? This is the one we want. So in our product repository, if you look, what we pasted in, okay, does not match the directory we used when we created the class name, because we typed repositories, okay? And I'll show you, I guess. Let's go back here to browser, here. When we created our repository, exactly, right here. Make class repositories. Hence, why when we paste in what he tells you to paste in, you're going to get that namespace error, right? So let's fix that. That's easy fix. It's really not a big deal, right? So you just change your namespace here, okay, to match the namespace we created. Okay. You should refresh that, and let's see, save that. And we have it in one more place. Right, repositories. I spelled it correctly. Okay. Right here, inside of our service provider, we also have to fix it. Repositories, product repository does not exist. Product repository. Oh, I spelled it wrong there. Repositories. Okay. So now once you get that namespace error resolved, okay. Why is it showing that? Did I do it in the other one too? Jesus. I did. I don't know why I spelled it repositories. Okay. There we go. Okay. Oh, and booyah. We get a working API, folks. Okay. So let me go ahead and switch over and show you that. Success. Our API is good. So thus, with just a few minor tweaks, Sandalaka, his tutorial is very decent. It works, right? There's just a couple minor spelling errors in there, and if you're fixing all those errors and you know it's right, it's probably you implementing a previous convention with Laravel, like I said. Hello world, this is the second part of the tutorial as I discussed in the first part of Laravel 11 REST API CRUD with best practices. So this part's going to cover, implementing some basic principles, basic coding principles, fundamental principles like solid, and in this particular instance drive, which is, do not repeat yourself. And I'm going to show you, exactly what I'm talking about. All right. So right now, I just completed the tutorial in its entirety and then went through and showed you how to correct any issues or errors you may have to have it up and running, which is it here. I did make one notable change as I added a little bit of data to further test it and show that our API response is working and all that, right? And it's making the calls to our models. So you can see the products that I added there. Okay, now we're pretty much done with this here. We're gonna go into the second part here, and so let me switch over to VS Code, and I'm gonna show you exactly what I mean, right? So let's go ahead and open up our our product repository, okay, and our product interface. The two main design patterns that we've implemented into this, right, through that tutorial. And so I'm here in the product repository interface, and for anybody who's ever used Laravel to any certain extent, that this index, store, update, delete, and even get by ID usually is pretty standardized across most of your objects. So like if you were to further develop utilizing this tutorial, like if you followed it exactly as so and just repeated what you've done, right, thus making like a book repository interface and a book repository, for instance, you would, like, I'm not going to actually make them, I'll just show you in quick simplicity by copying this one, right, and paste, and then let's just say, this was, you actually went through and you created these and registered providers and such, right? Like you're actually developing, and, this was book, and you had a book model and such, right? Okay. It would literally just let's go ahead, copy that, and we're gonna replace that with book. Okay. And you had your book repository interface on there, and this here. Okay. So as you can see, now you would have, and now let's say you're working on something extensive like a car. We have like a lot of different objects you could have in there, tire, wheel, shock, strut, gear, cylinders, cylinder head, alternator, and then however further you need to go, right? As you can see, you're gonna have pretty much a lot of repetition. You're repeating yourself, okay, with these base functions, right? And that's exactly what they are, okay, base methods in a sense. And so what we're going to do is actually, like I said, this right here is literally, this screams to me dry, right? Like, do not repeat yourself, okay? And like in procedural programming, when you start to see a lot of collections of like the same like code and function call, like a lot of people do stuff like this, and at that point, if you're going to start doing it, it's best just to create a function or a method, and then almost an interface, so to speak, to make all your calls to those. So that way, instead of that, you just have like a call chain, right, method or something like that, and that makes all of these calls. So instead of that, I mean, you're obviously going to get to a certain point where like you're going to need to make calls to that, and you can't not have certain levels of repetitiveness, but you want to abstract away most of it to the best of your ability, in the sense where you can easily have a certain level of maintainability and make changes easy, especially when you're scaling and you have a large application, and so obviously we're going to have a lot more repetition here with our interfaces too, right? So like if we had a book interface, it's going to have the same exact stuff here, right? So we're going to kind of step back, right? And we're going to just implement basic parent-children relationships. These are object-oriented fundamentals 101, and we're just going to create base classes for these to extend from, all right? That's going to give us a lot of easier maintainability, and it's going to ensure that we're not placing all these same functions onto the call stack every time we're instantiating or utilizing various objects, you know what I mean? So I'll explain it as we go along, but in the meantime, let me get rid of that, right? We're not actually going to use that. I'm just going to still kind of stick with converting over from the tutorial, okay? And then you can go from there, right? All right. So I'm going to get rid of that book repository. So now we're back to pretty much square one from leaving off from the tutorial, right? And I'm going to start with the repositories, and then so in order to do this, we need to create a base repository, right? So we're going to go make class repositories. /base repository. And now you could call this, and I'll explain this in a second, base eloquent repository, if you really wanted to get even further into this, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call it base repository. And as you can see, it's created here, right? And I'm going to open it up. And what I was referring to is this really, since it's implementing, the eloquent model calls inside of it, right, it is going to become a base eloquent model. And that's kind of the cool part about repositories, is now we can have these different abstracted bases, like base Redis model, if you really wanted to, or in that sense. And that's where that further abstraction comes into play, right? And again, this is what I was saying with placing a whole bunch of stuff onto the call stack, in a sense, is instead of having this and inside there, and then our product specific logic as well. So all the different functions related to this particular object would be in here as well, right? We're not going to have those, okay? I'm gonna go boom, and those are going to get placed once in this base instantiation on the stack, right? So we get rid of those. Okay, we take those common functions, methods out of the product repository and leave it like as it is, your product repository like this for now, okay? Go over to the base repository class you created, and we have to fix this, right? We have to, kind of decouple this from, actual models, very specific models, right? And this is where you're getting into more of that, you're abstracting away coupling, or tight coupling and modeling, right? And so in order to do this, so we have to pass in, the model that the base instantiation is going to be using, right? And so to do that, we need to create a protected attribute or property for this class, that we'll just call model, right? And in order to use the model, right, again, like I said, this is actually a base eloquent repository. We need to include the eloquent model. Use Illuminate database eloquent model, okay? And then in here, we will be passing it in an eloquent model, right? And so we pass that in, and we'll set it to our attribute real quick. And now you notice we're no longer, since it's being instantiated, this one, we're no longer using static calls to it, right? This, and I like the camel case, any kind of thing that is storing an object as well inside of it. That is good notation, so that way it lets me know that that's an object in there too. Okay. And now we pretty much just have to replace this with instantiated calls, right? So we can go here, we can change that to this model, there, right? And go through and change your calls there. Boom. And you're set, right? This is your base class now, your base repository. Okay, and all of your products, your books, and everything can expand from this, extend, and have access, to these same generic methods and logic implementation, right? So now here we do have to make a couple changes, right? So obviously now this is a child class. We have to import, include its parent. So we want to use app repositories, base repository, right? And as I said, we need to extend, this call stack in a sense, from the one that's already placed here. So we're gonna add the extends keyword in base repository, okay? Class product repository, extends base repository, implements. So we'll save that, yep. Base repository. I got something going on. And then, yes, so implements product repository interface. Okay, so we're gonna still have errors for a short minute until we actually fix our product repository interface, okay? So let's do that real quick. So let's create our base product, because that's actually fairly easy as well, right? So let's create our base product repository, so our interface. So I'm going to go use the artisan command, make interface, and then I'm going to go base interface. Okay, and as you can see in the interfaces, now I have my base interface. And it's going to be the exact same concept. I'm literally just going to take all of these reused core functions. I'm going to take it out of the product repository interface, and I'm just going to drop it into the base interface, right? And so let's save that. Okay, repository. We got that. And that's actually set, your base interface, done. Okay. Your product repository interface now needs to include that base interface, right? So app slash interfaces slash base interface, okay. And interface, and it's going to extend from the base interface as well. So we have to include that, okay. Extends base interface, okay. And so we're set there. So I'll leave that open because I'm going to come back to that in a second. But we'll go back to product repository here. Extends base repository. Base repositories. Everything seems to be spelled correctly. Okay, and then in here we actually have to create a constructor to pass along the model from the controller into the base repository, into its parent essentially, right? So construct, function construct, we already have it in there, so it's going to be getting a product in there. So, and then here we will call our base class constructor. That function I showed you, that's going to load the model into the protected property there, right? So there you go, right? You have that. Extends. I have something's going on. I'm missing something here. Extends base app repositories. Base repository, app repository. Okay, we have a product. And we're missing something. Oh, I got something going on here. Is it? No. What? Oh my gosh, guys. You know, a very common mistake, right? Okay. So there you go. That, you know, when you add your semicolon, okay, that should take care of it, right? Everything there is the core essential of what you need to have, you know, your object repositories now. And this is going to be like what all of your, you know, like if you did the book repository, it would be the exact same way. Instead of, you know, product, you'd pass it the book model, right? And that's going to end up hitting your base repository and being stored in here. And now you kind of have that middle layer abstraction that's taking care of it, right? So let's put that back there as the product, right? All right, and let me just quickly go really quick back through that. And of course, you know, that's what we did here. We changed those. So that's good. You actually don't really need to do much more to this. The only thing you would ever have to add to this base repository is if there was a whole lot of additional, which you know, there are some functions in there, you know, like that you may want to add, you know, that are very, very common across all of your base eloquent calls, right? So we're done with that. Of course, when you do that, obviously make sure you update your interface as well, right? So we're done with those, and now you pretty much will never have to deal with those. Everything you're going to do is, you know, extend from those with all your new repositories and your interface, right? So that's what we did here, you know, we're extending from our base repository. Same here in our product repository interface, we're extending from our base interface, okay? So what you would do now at this point inside, because it's like these are pretty much just, you know, a scaffold, a code template in a sense, right? What you would do is add your product specific stuff, your book specific things to this. Like for instance, if you had a product, like you would add in here, you know, first and really truthfully, you would go to your interface and be like public function check UPC, or well, we'll go check product UPC, and we would pass it an ID and like a UPC code, right? And that's specific to the product repository. It's not a generalized index or create or whatever, right? So then in our product repository, we would do the same thing. We'd actually implement it as we were previously. So you would do check product UPC, right? And then your code in here, which you could actually do product, and then you'd have to add, this to your model, essentially, check product UPC, and then like ID and UPC, for instance, right? And then you save it, and as you notice, there's no errors or anything. I mean, this might throw an error because there's nothing, there's no model call, but we'll check. Let's see here. Let's go to our browser. Let me refresh it. Nope. So yeah, everything's good, as you can see, right? I've moved everything over to these base classes here, and our base interface and our base repository. And so now we're really set to further extend and develop this application and develop object-oriented classes, and based on like what the domain or business logic is of our application. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's all I wanted to show you on that one. Kind of a quick, simple fix on it. If you have any questions, you can look me up and find me on YouTube, and please follow me on YouTube. I'm just starting with coding tutorials and EE and math tutorials and things on there, and there's going to be a lot more. I'm going to continue making them. I'm still learning the process. As you can see, the audio is a little different on this one. I'm still trying to refine that kind of stuff, and as I get more capabilities and money and such, I'll probably try to get some better recording things. So I appreciate your time, and I hope this does help you get to where you need. And so some of those folks out there in the comments that are struggling to get this to work, I think you should be good, because as you can see, I've did everything you would need to get it here to where it's at. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for watching. Again, follow me on YouTube, and have a good one.